Samuel's last words weren't "I love you." They were a warning: never go to the farm. Angela. Those were Samuel's last words to me. They cut deeper than any goodbye. He died suddenly at 62. A heart attack in the middle of the night. One moment he was breathing beside me. The next, silence. The funeral was simple. A wooden casket, lilies placed on top. The church bell tolled. Family gathered whispering in small groups. I kept my head low. My hands trembled as I held the folded obituary. The black ink printed the date, the time, the place. After the service, the lawyer Harris approached me. His face carried the weight of secrets. He pressed something cold into my palm. It was a brass key, heavy, worn by years. Attached to it was a maple leaf charm, its edges scratched against my skin. "This is yours now," Harris said. His voice was steady, but his eyes searched mine. He spoke no more, then stepped aside quietly. I stared at the key. Questions rushed in. Why did Samuel forbid me for decades, then leave me this now? What did it mean around me? Relatives murmured. Some asked if Samuel had left a will. Others wondered aloud if property should be shared with his brothers. One cousin scoffed. He owned land. It should be divided. That's how family works. Another shook her head. No, a wife comes first. Their debate buzzed in my ears like flies. Tradition against law, blood ties against marital vows. Everyone had an opinion, but none had answers. I clutched the key tighter. The maple leaf charm pressed hard into my skin. It left a faint mark, almost like a burn. I whispered under my breath, "I will not let you be forgotten, Samuel." My vow carried both grief and defiance. The weight of that key settled inside me. It was more than metal. It was a secret, a burden, a door waiting to be opened. I slipped it into my pocket. My steps felt heavier. I knew my life had changed. The forbidden farm was now calling my name. The rain began as a thin mist soft against my windshield. Soon it thickened into heavy drops that smeared the glass. My wipers fought desperately. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles turned pale. The road stretched ahead, long and grey, lined with trees stripped bare by autumn winds. Beside me, the passenger seat was empty. I reached over, brushing the worn fabric with my fingertips. My chest ached. He had sat there countless times. The car smelled faintly of cedar. Samuel loved using cedar polish on everything. Even this old car bore his scent. It was like he was riding along. The radio crackled with static. Then a familiar tune broke through. Al Green's voice filled the car. "Let's stay together." I closed my eyes for a moment. That was our wedding song. We had danced slowly, laughing when he tripped over my gown. 30 years later, the lyrics struck me harder than ever before. I had lived 3 decades with Samuel. 30 years of routines, arguments, reconciliations, and quiet nights. And still I realized there were parts of him I never knew. The farm was his biggest secret. He never explained why it was off limits. Every time I asked, he turned away. His lips pressed tight, eyes clouded. One evening years ago, I tried to push harder. "Samuel, why is that land forbidden? What are you hiding from me?" My voice shook but stayed firm. He had looked at me sharply. His hand gripped mine until it hurt. "Angela, some things are better left buried. Leave it alone." Then he walked away. That conversation haunted me now. Why bury the truth? Why guard the land so fiercely, yet leave me its key after his death? None of it made sense. The rain grew heavier. Water splashed beneath my tires. I slowed, careful, on the slippery asphalt. Road signs blurred past, their green paint glistening under headlights. At a gas station along the highway, I stopped briefly. The clerk handed me a receipt for gas. Samuel's name still appeared on the credit account. The sight of his name printed neatly in blue ink sliced through me. Proof he had once existed, now reduced to paper slips and fading signatures. I tucked the receipt into my wallet. Alongside it were older slips, reminders of property tax payments. Maple Hollow had been listed in Samuel's handwriting, paid every year. The truth stared at me. He had invested in that land for years without telling me, quietly, secretly carrying the burden of something I was not meant to see. The highway narrowed into a rural road. Farms appeared on either side, fields stretching into the mist, corn stalks bent under the weight of rain. A crooked wooden board came into view. The faded white letters read, Maple Hollow Farm. Some of the paint had peeled away, yet the name remained bold. I slowed the car. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. I could almost hear Samuel's voice again. Never go to the farm, Angela. But the key burned in my pocket, the weight of brass, the cold edge of the maple leaf charm. It was calling me forward. I turned down the gravel path. Tires crunched loudly, echoing in the silence. My headlights caught glimpses of a rusted fence, broken posts leaning sideways. Branches scraped against the car as I drove further. The farmhouse silhouette appeared in the distance, tall, dark, rising from the mist like a ghost. I parked near the gate. The rain eased to a drizzle, leaving behind the smell of wet earth. I sat there staring at the old house. The passenger seat beside me seemed to whisper. I pressed my hand against the cushion again. For a moment, I imagined Samuel there, humming with the radio. My throat tightened. You should be here, I whispered. But only silence answered, heavy and final. I stepped out of the car. Gravel crunched beneath my shoes. The wind tugged at my coat. Cold raindrops slid down my face. The sign above the gate creaked in the wind. Maple Hollow Farm. The name hung there like a sentence waiting to be read. I walked closer, holding the key in my palm. My hand trembled. The maple leaf charm dangled, catching the dim light from my headlights. The memory of our 30 years together pressed on me. Samuel's laughter, his silence, his stubbornness, his secrets, every piece now felt unfinished, incomplete. I asked myself again, why had he lived with this silence? Why had he never let me see this place? Why leave it to me now? No answer came. Only the sound of wind and rain. Only the hollow echo of my own breathing as I stood before the gate. Still I felt his presence. In the smell of cedar lingering on my coat. In the song still humming faintly from the car radio. I pressed the key against my lips. Whatever truth waits inside, I will face it, I said softly. The gate creaked open. The farm loomed ahead, dark and silent, holding decades of unanswered questions. I stepped forward, heart-pounding, breath shallow. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the porch. My shoes left damp prints across the cracked wooden steps leading to the front door. I gripped the brass key. It was cold, heavy, almost alive. My fingers trembled as I slid it into the rusted lock and turned. The lock groaned, then gave way. The door creaked open with a sound like bones snapping. I braced myself for dust and decay, but what I saw made me stumble back. The house was not abandoned. It was immaculate, freshly painted, polished floors, gleaming under dim light. My heart hammered. The walls were lined with paintings, horses every size and color, galloping, rearing, grazing. The brushstrokes were careful, precise, yet bursting with life. I froze. These were my paintings. My style, my passion I had abandoned after marriage. Samuel had recreated what I loved most in secret. My knees weakened. I reached out, touching the frame of one canvas. My fingertips traced the rough texture of paint, as if time had rewound 30 years. Tears blurred my vision. He remembered. He carried my forgotten dreams into this hidden place, away from my doubts and his silence. A desk stood in the corner. Heavy oak, polished smooth. A sealed envelope rested on top. My name written in Samuel's handwriting, for Angela. I sat slowly, legs trembling beneath me. My breath caught in my throat as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, pages filled with ink. Angela, it began. This land was stolen from my father long ago. I spent my life trying to buy it back. Now it is ours again. He confessed he had used his savings, his overtime wages, every extra dollar, to purchase Maple Hollow 3 years earlier. He never told me, afraid of burdening me. "This is my way of setting things right," he wrote. "For too long our family lived under shadows of resentment. This land is meant to heal, not divide." My tears fell onto the page. Words blurred, but the weight of his confession pressed harder than any storm outside. He ended with a single line. "Go there once. The desk holds what you need. Then you will understand." I folded the letter carefully, my hands shaking. The air felt thick, heavy with his presence. Every word carried both love and guilt. On the desk lay another object. A leather folder stamped with the seal of Whitmore Construction. I recognized the emblem. Samuel had hidden nothing here. I opened it. Inside were invoices, receipts, permits, real documents dated 3 years ago. One stamped with a red seal. Completed October 17th, 2020. Whitmore Construction had restored the farmhouse completely. Labor hours, material lists, contractor signatures. Every detail preserved in careful handwriting. Samuel had kept everything. The reality was undeniable. He had not only bought the land, he had poured money, sweat, and secrecy into rebuilding it for me. I pressed the folder to my chest. A sob escaped before I could stop it. This was his final gift. His way of saying, "I remembered you." Yet beneath the gratitude, a question burned. Why secrecy? Why forbid me from coming here, then leave it all behind without explanation? The silence of the house answered nothing. Only the ticking of an old clock on the mantel broke the air. Each second sounded like a heartbeat. I walked the hall, fingers brushing the walls. Each room glowed with care. Polished wood furniture placed perfectly. It was as if he had prepared a home for us. In the dining room, a long table stood, polished silverware gleaming. A note card tucked beneath a plate read, "For when we gather again." My chest tightened. Samuel had imagined family here, united again. But I knew the truth. His brothers would see only profit, not healing. I could already hear their voices, even in memory. "Land belongs to blood, Angela, not to outsiders." Their words carried years of bitterness and entitlement. But was blood enough? Who owned the land, the ones who abandoned it, or the one who sacrificed to rebuild it? The question split my mind in two. The debate echoed inside me like a courtroom argument. Tradition against effort, bloodlines against love. Which weighed heavier? Which was just? I thought of my students from years ago. Teaching history had shown me how wars often began with land disputes. Nothing divided people faster. Samuel must have known this. That was why he rebuilt quietly, hiding his labor of love in silence, hoping perhaps that beauty would speak louder than anger. I returned to the living room. My eyes caught one final painting, a mare and foal standing side by side under a maple tree. My breath caught. That was my dream painting. I had once sketched it as a young woman, but never finished. He had painted it for me. My body shook. I dropped to my knees, pressing my forehead against the cool wood floor. "You remembered Samuel. You carried me with you." Grief and healing crashed together inside me. Pain for the years I doubted him. Gratitude for the love he guarded in secret. I rose slowly, wiping my eyes. The key in my pocket felt lighter now, as though its burden had shifted into purpose. I whispered into the empty room, "This land is not theirs. It is ours, and I will protect it." The farmhouse stood quiet, but I felt Samuel near. His presence lingered in every painting, every polished surface, every hidden document. I touched the frame of the mare and foal once more. My healing had begun. His secret had broken me, then lifted me in the same breath. The journey forward would not be easy. His brothers would come. Questions would rise. But in this moment, the truth was mine to carry. And for the first time since his death, I did not feel entirely alone. I was still clutching Samuel's letter when I heard the sound. Tires crunching over gravel. Headlights sweeping across the window panes like searchlights. My stomach tightened. 2 trucks pulled up near the gate. Their engines idled loud against the night's quiet. My breath caught. I recognized those silhouettes even before they stepped out. Richard and Thomas, Samuel's brothers. Broad shoulders, stiff postures, faces lined by years of hard labor and harder grudges. They walked toward the porch with practiced arrogance. I froze by the window. My heart raced. Their boots struck the ground with force, as if each step carried accusation. My hands tightened around the brass key. The door rattled under a sharp knock. Angela Richards' voice boomed. "We know you're in there. Open up. It's time we talk business." I stayed still for a moment. The house was Samuel's gift, his memory. But their voices pushed like thunder. I had no choice but to face them. I opened the door halfway. The night air swept in cold and sharp. Richard's grin spread wide, teeth flashing. Thomas stood behind him, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Evening sister-in-law Richard said, his tone dripping with venom, "Maple Hollow may have Samuel's name on it, but don't forget, his blood is our blood. Family land doesn't belong to widows. It belongs to us." Thomas nodded, pulling a folded packet from his coat. Northern Extraction already drafted a preliminary contract. "The oil reserves here could bring millions. We just need your signature." My throat tightened. He thrust the papers forward. The company's logo printed in bold. Official stamps. Dates typed cleanly. It was real, not rumor. I stepped back. The polished floors beneath me seemed to tremble. Their eyes glittered with greed, not grief. Samuel's love his secrecy was being reduced to profit margins. Richard leaned closer. "Think about it, Angela. Jobs for the town. Money for us all. No point clinging to sentimental walls. This is opportunity knocking." Thomas added, "Samuel knew this was valuable. That's why he bought it back. But now he's gone. It's time to do something useful." The words pierced me. Useful. As if art on the walls, as if Samuel's care meant nothing, as if legacy was measured only in barrels of oil. I swallowed hard. Memories flooded back, Samuel gripping my hand years ago, whispering, "Don't trust them, Angela." His warning pulsed louder than the pounding of my heart. Still, I forced myself to speak. "This house is not yours. Samuel rebuilt it. He left it to me. It's not for sale." My voice shook but held. Richard laughed, deep and sharp. "Come on. You think one woman can stand against family tradition and corporate lawyers? Don't be foolish. You'll only delay the inevitable." Thomas's lips curled. "Sign now, and you'll get a generous cut. Refuse, and you'll watch lawyers tear this place apart. Either way, we win." A fire sparked in my chest. Rage mixed with grief. My fist clenched at my sides, pressing the key so hard it left a mark in my palm. The debate in my mind mirrored society's argument. Should land serve economic growth, or should it remain as legacy jobs versus memory, oil versus preservation? I thought of Maple Hollow's fields outside, still damp with rain. Could heavy drills and steel machines really replace the quiet healing Samuel had envisioned here? I imagined children running through grass, horses grazing under the maple tree. Then I imagined smokestacks, pipelines, and poisoned soil. 2 futures clashed before me, unbearable in contrast. Richard's smile cracked. "All our lives, Samuel was the golden son. Thomas and I were called mistakes. Do you know how that feels? And now you keep the land too." "Your choice." My knees threatened to buckle, but I stood straighter. "No," I whispered then, louder, firmer. "No. This land is not for sale. Not now. Not ever." Silence hung heavy for a moment. Their faces hardened. Richard's smile faded into a scowl. Thomas shoved the papers back into his coat, lips tight with fury. Richard leaned closer. His breath stank of tobacco. "You will regret this. Adrian deserves a share. We will tell him your truth." The name hit me like a slap. Adrian. My son. My chest constricted. They would use him against me. Their threat cut deeper than any contract. I held the key tighter. Samuel's words echoed once more. Don't trust them. My husband had known this day would come. He had armed me with silence and proof. I stepped back inside, closing the door firmly. Their boots scraped on the porch as they turned away, muttering curses that trailed into the night. From the window, I watched their trucks disappear down the gravel road. The roar of engines faded, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. I collapsed against the door, clutching the key to my chest. Its cold edges pressed into my skin, grounding me in Samuel's memory. The healing came in a fragile whisper. I was not alone. Samuel's warning, his care, had crossed the grave to shield me tonight. I whispered into the empty room, voice trembling, but clear. You were right, Samuel. They came for it. But I will not let them take it. The house around me seemed to breathe. Paintings of horses glowed in the dim light. Their silent strength reminded me of who I had once been. I stood again, wiping my tears. This was only the beginning. The fight for Maple Hollow had started, and I carried both Samuel's love and his defiance within me. The night after Richard and Thomas came still lingers in my chest. Their threats, their words about Adrian, keep circling in my mind. Sleep refuses to come. By morning, I know I cannot face this storm alone. Samuel might be gone, but he left me threads to follow. I decide where to start. I drive down the narrow road into Maple Hollow town. The air carries the smell of wet earth and smoke from breakfast fires. The world moves on, unaware of my turmoil. Gloria lives near the edge of town. A small house, shutters faded but tidy. She has been the caretaker of these fields longer than I have known Samuel. She opens the door before I knock twice. Her hair silver and long is tied back. Her eyes are sharp, full of the kind of wisdom only grief and survival teach. Angela, she says softly, I knew you'd come. I step inside. The scent of lavender and old wood wraps around me. A kettle whistles on her stove. She pours tea into 2 chipped cups. We sit at her kitchen table. She does not waste time. Samuel came here often, every month. He walked those fields. He checked the beams. He made sure everything stood strong. Her words hit me. Samuel, who told me never to visit, was here constantly, building in silence, creating a gift I only now discover. Why didn't he tell me? My voice trembles. Gloria sets her hand over mine. Warmth steadies me. He wanted to protect you, from his brothers, from the fights. He believed this land would speak for him one day. I bite my lip, the weight of love and secrecy pressing down. She rises, pulls a folder from a drawer, and lays it before me. He asked me to keep this safe, in case you ever came. I open it. Inside, a permit stamped 3 years back. Official documents from the county office. Construction approvals with Samuel's signature, bold and clear. Each page lists contractors' materials, timelines, names of men who worked the beams, receipts of wages paid in cash. This was no illusion. This house stands on paper as much as on wood. I trace the signatures, my fingers trembling. Samuel documented every step, proof of his intent. Hold on to these, Gloria says. They matter more than any memory. The door creaks behind us. A voice clears. It is Harris, Samuel's lawyer. I had asked him to meet me here. His suit looks out of place in Gloria's warm kitchen. He places his briefcase on the table, clicks it open, and scans the folder. His brows lift. This is exactly what we need. Angela, in court emotions mean little. Documents win. His voice is calm, professional, but there is a weight in his tone. He knows the storm I face. I whisper, they want to drag Adrian into this. They want to poison him against me. Harris exhales. Richard and Thomas will play dirty. They always have. But remember, Samuel left you more than land. He left you proof, and proof is stronger than rumor. The words settle deep inside me. Proof is stronger than rumor. Gloria adds gently, and he left you his faith. He always said you were stronger than you believed. The room quiets. The only sound is the soft hiss of the kettle cooling. I close my eyes for a moment. The healing comes through Gloria's hand on my shoulder. For the first time since Samuel's death, I feel less alone. But outside these walls, the town is already stirring with whispers. At the general store that afternoon, I overhear voices. One man says, if they sell the land to the oil company, our kids could finally get jobs. Another replies, and poison the water. My father's well already runs shallow. If they drill here, nothing will survive. The divide cuts through the community. Growth versus survival. Economy versus environment. A debate as old as the soil itself. I walk past them silently, their words sticking to me like burrs. Samuel must have known this conflict would rise. That is why he planned so carefully. Back at the farm, I spread the documents across the dining table Samuel prepared. The permits, the receipts, the construction logs. Each page a weapon, sharper than any threat. I imagine Richard's face when confronted with these, his smirk fading, his voice faltering. My pulse quickens at the thought, yet my heart aches. I do not want battle. I want peace. I want Samuel back. But wanting will not change the world. Only courage will. That night, I light a single candle and sit by the window. The brass key rests in my palm. I whisper to Samuel, "You trusted me with this. I will not fail you." The flame flickers, casting long shadows on the wall. Horses in the paintings seem to move alive in the dance of light. They look at me steady and strong. Gloria's words echo. He always believed you were stronger. Harris's warning repeats. Proof is stronger than rumor. I gather the papers into a neat stack, bind them with a ribbon Samuel once used to tie my hair. Tomorrow I will begin the real fight. For now I allow myself a breath. Healing comes in small doses. Tonight it comes through tea, through friendship, through Samuel's faith carried forward. I press the key to my lips and whisper, "We are not finished, Samuel. Not yet." Morning light pooled across the oak desk. Dust shimmered like small stars. I set the permits aside and reached for the camcorder. A yellow sticky note clung to its side. Samuel's handwriting read, "Press play." My hands shook as I flipped the switch on. The screen blinked, then steadied. His face filled the frame. Healthy cheeks, bright eyes that half smile I knew well. "Angela," he said. His voice slid through me like warm water. "If you are watching this, I am already gone." I gripped the edge of the desk. The brass key pressed into my palm. I could not breathe for a moment. "I wanted to tell you earlier," he continued. "I could not find the courage. I feared changing the way you looked at me." He inhaled slowly, then nodded. 3 years ago, on April 12th, 2019, I was diagnosed. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, he said. "It runs in my family. Thickened heart muscle. Risk of sudden arrest. A quiet thief of breath." He lifted a folder into view. A blue folder, edges frayed. He opened it and held pages toward the lens. "Echocardiogram report," he said, tapping the header. "Whitcomb Heart Clinic, Grand Rapids. Dr. Eliza Vance. Left ventricular wall thickness, 20 millimeters." He turned another page. "Electrocardiogram abnormal. Holter monitor findings. Episodes of ventricular tachycardia." He tried to smile. I learned new words that day. He set the folder down. He lifted 2 orange bottles. Metoprolol 50 milligrams twice daily. Verapamil extended release nightly. I took them like clockwork. I felt the room tilt. He had swallowed fear behind the quiet of our evenings. He had measured time in pills, not in days. "I did not tell you," he said softly. "Not because I did not trust you. Because I wanted to protect your joy." He looked down, then back up. "I did not want my diagnosis to own our house. I did not want you to watch the clock with me." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The horses on the wall seemed to lean closer, as if listening. Samuel leaned nearer to the camera. There is more, he said. I lived a double life. Husband by day, builder by night. I drove here after work trips, he said. I met contractors at dawn. I checked beams before dusk. I learned to speak their craft. I carried lumber with them when I could, he added. I signed every invoice. I paid every worker on time. He smiled wryly. I was not graceful with a hammer, but I was stubborn. Stubborn love can lift a roof. He gestured beyond the frame. I rebuilt Maple Hollow to heal something old, not only in me, in our family. His jaw tightened. Richard and Thomas believe land must answer blood. They will say legacy is a vein, not a vow. He shook his head. I disagree. Legacy is what we build, not what we inherit. It is what we steward, not what we seize. He paused, letting the line settle. I felt it anchor somewhere deep in my chest. He opened the blue folder again. You will need proof, he said. The permits, the contracts, the photos. The dates are clear. He slid out a printed timeline. Purchase agreement, May 1st, 2020. Deed recorded May 7th. Renovation completed October 17th, 2020. He flipped to a small stack of photos. Here is the Western Foundation before repairs. Here is the roof truss delivery. Here is the final inspection stamp. He looked back at me through the screen. I know they will come fast. They always do when money smells near. He pressed his lips together. Northern Extraction will arrive with papers. They will promise jobs. They will call it progress. His eyes softened. People in town will be torn. I understand them. Work puts food on tables, but water should still be safe to drink. He sighed. This is not a simple choice. Jobs matter, health matters, history matters. You will carry all three in your hands. He leaned back. There is another question we cannot dodge, he said. Do families owe each other genetic truth? He held my gaze. I feared telling Adrian. I feared giving him a lifetime of worry. Would he live under a shadow he cannot stop? He glanced aside, then back. But secrecy costs too. He deserves the option to test. He deserves to plan his life with knowledge. He rubbed his temple. I chose silence while I could still hold it. Perhaps that was selfish. Perhaps it was mercy. Perhaps both. His voice thinned. If you decide to tell him gently. Remind him a gene is not a cage. Remind him he is free. He lifted the pill bottles again. I managed well enough for a time. I walked daily. I avoided stress where I could. A small smile returned. You were the best part of my plan. Your laughter lowered my blood pressure better than any drug. He looked past the camera. His eyes shone. But time is not a bargain. My heart said so before my pride would listen. He straightened. That is why I built this place for you. Love should leave more than a funeral program and a folded flag. He reached under the desk. He set down a black case. There is a spare drive inside, he said. Copies of contracts and videos. Some videos are for you alone, he added. Some are for Adrian when he is ready. Do not rush him. Let truth arrive kindly. I covered my mouth with my hand. A sob tried to escape. I held it down like a tide. He softened his voice. Angela, you asked me once why I forbade the farm. I was afraid this place would pull us into old wars. I wanted to finish the house before I showed you, he said. I wanted you to see beauty first before you saw the fight. He rested his elbows on the desk. I am sorry I put you on this road without me, but I have faith in your feet. He lifted a small envelope into view. There is a letter for Adrian in the top drawer. Give it to him when you feel ready. I opened the drawer beside me. The envelope lay where he said. Adrian written in strong lines. I set it back carefully. Samuel looked toward the window on his side. If you can hear rain while you watch this, know I planned for that sound. He smiled. Horses calm during rain. People can too. Breath slows. Shoulders loosen. Try it with me now. I took one slow breath with him, then another. The ache in my chest eased a fraction. His smile deepened. "Good," he said. "I hoped I could help you across that small bridge." He tapped the blue folder once more. "Keep these records close. Judges trust ink. Juries trust dates. Let paper speak when voices shake." He leaned in again. "And hold your own ground. You do not need to yell. You only need to stand." He looked like the man I married and the man I was meeting anew. Husband, builder, strategist, caretaker of our future. He lifted his hand toward the camera. "Touch the screen," he said gently. "Let me feel your promise." I pressed my fingers to the glass. The image warmed under my skin. My tears fell and dotted the desk. "I love you," he said. "Not for the years behind us, for the courage I still see in you." He paused. "There will be days you doubt me." "That is fair. Let the house answer when I cannot." He nodded once. "Close this now. Eat something warm. Call Harris. Visit Gloria. Then rest. I will meet you again tomorrow." The video ended on his smile. The screen went black. The room returned quiet as a chapel. I stayed there breathing slowly, fingers still touching the glass. The key lay warm in my palm, now not cold. I opened the blue folder. I scanned the diagnosis date again. April 12th, 2019. I read the drug names aloud. I traced the clinic stamp. I pressed the timeline to my chest. I felt steadier than I had an hour ago. A faint gust rattled the window. Rain began again, soft and steady. I let the sound wash over me like a benediction. I whispered to the empty room. "I hear you, Samuel. I will stand. I will tell the truth in the right way." I set the envelope for Adrian back into the drawer. Not today. Soon, but not today. Kindness needs timing. I stacked the records neatly. I locked them in the desk. The latch clicked, clean and final. Then I turned off the camcorder and held it close. His voice lingered like a heartbeat that refused to fade. I stood and touched the nearest painting. A chestnut mare, ears forward, ready. I mirrored her stance and breathed. My phone buzzed on the table. I did not answer yet. I let silence finish its work. I let healing take one more breath. The rain had not stopped since morning. Drops hammered the tin roof steady and merciless. I stood by the window, watching the grey sheet blur the fields. My phone buzzed on the table. I reached for it, half expecting Harris, maybe Gloria. But the name on the screen made my chest tighten. "Adrian." I answered quickly. "Son." My voice was softer than I meant. There was silence for a beat. Then his voice came sharp, almost rehearsed. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about the farm?" The question sliced through me. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Adrian, what?" He cut me off. "Uncle Richard showed me the papers. Dad was going to divide the land for all of us. You've been hiding it." My knees weakened. I leaned against the wall for balance. "That's not true," I whispered. His voice rose. "Melissa texted me last night. She said everyone in town knows. You're trying to keep it all. Is that why you never said a word, Melissa, his cousin Richard's daughter?" I closed my eyes. The trap was clear now. They had turned my son into a weapon. "Adrian, listen," I said gently. "Your father rebuilt this place for no mom," he snapped. "For family. For us. That's what he wanted. And now you're standing in the way." I could hear the hurt under his anger. I could also hear Richard's echo in every word. I swallowed back tears. My mind flashed to the blue folder, to Samuel's voice on the screen. "Don't argue. Let truth speak." I steadied my breath. "Adrian, I love you. That hasn't changed." He exhaled, shaky but firm. "Then prove it. Show me Dad's will. Because what Uncle Richard showed me says otherwise." My stomach dropped. A forged will. They had gone that far. I imagined Richard holding a photocopy, Melissa passing the rumor. Lies dressed as evidence. "I can't do this right now," I whispered. My voice cracked. but the truth will come." He went silent. I thought I heard rain on his end too. Then he said cold and clipped, "If you really cared, you'd share. Maybe Uncle Richard was right about you." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My own son doubted me, not because of what I had done, but because greed had borrowed his voice. I stepped outside into the storm. Rain drenched me instantly, plastering my hair to my face, soaking my clothes. I did not care. The brass key hung heavy around my neck. I gripped it tight until it cut into my palm. The world blurred, but through the downpour, I saw Samuel's paintings in my mind, horses standing strong against wind and storm. "Truth will speak," I whispered. My words vanished into the rain. I said it again louder until it became a chant. "Truth will speak." The storm raged, but inside me a new resolve sparked. I would not fight my son with anger. I would fight with proof. I lifted my face to the rain. It mixed with tears, cleansing, stinging. My body trembled, but my will steadied. Betrayal had cut deep, but Samuel had prepared me. Evidence was my shield. Patience was my sword. The storm would pass, and when it did, the truth would remain standing. The days after Adrian's call felt heavy. His silence cut deeper than his words, yet the storm around Maple Hollow grew louder, not quieter. One evening Harris phoned. His tone was clipped. "They've done it. Richard and Thomas signed a contract with Northern Extraction, without your consent." My chest tightened. "Is it binding?" "Not without the original deed," Harris replied, "and Samuel made sure you have it. Their copy holds no weight. Still, they will try to bluff the town." I pressed the brass key against my palm. Proof was stronger than rumor, Samuel had said, but greed still shouted louder than truth. That weekend, the town gathered at the council hall. The agenda was printed plainly: discussion on Northern Extraction proposal. My hands trembled as I held the sheet. Inside the room was split. Men in work boots sat beside mothers with toddlers. Teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, all pulled between hope and fear. A man stood waving the contract. Richard's voice thundered. "This will bring jobs, stability, future for Maple Hollow." Murmurs of approval rippled. For many, steady work was no small promise. Then Mrs. Kellerman, who ran the dairy farm, rose. "Jobs at what cost? Our wells are shallow. My cows drink that water. If it's poisoned, we all pay." Arguments tangled across the room. Progress versus preservation. Money versus memory. The council clerk read from a binder. Report from Geologic Survey, dated March 2, 2022. Estimated reserve 1.4 million barrels. Potential extraction 15 years. Gasps echoed. Numbers pulled hearts in directions. Words never could. But Harris leaned over and whispered to me, "Their contract is void. Without your deed, this meeting is theater." I nodded, but my stomach still churned. This was more than law. This was about who the town believed. After the session ended, I stepped outside into the cool night. A young man lingered near the steps. His face was familiar from construction crews. He approached hesitant. "Mrs. Whitlow, my name's Darnell. I worked the fields when Samuel was rebuilding." I studied him. Barely 25 calloused hands, eyes both weary and earnest. "I just wanted to say," he began, "I need the money. My dad lost his job last year. Oil work would pay bills." I nodded slowly, ready for the sting. But he continued, voice steady. "Now I want my little girl to run through green fields, not grow up choking on smoke. I'd rather earn less than see her childhood sold to oil rigs." His words struck me like an arrow. Simple, unpolished, yet cutting to the bone. The very conflict inside me reflected in a stranger's eyes. "Thank you, Darnell," I whispered. "Your honesty matters more than you know." He tipped his cap, then walked off into the shadows, leaving me with his quiet courage. That night, I opened Samuel's folder again. Among the contracts and receipts lay minutes from a county board meeting stamped 2 years ago. The notes were clear: proposal denied. Environmental concerns outweigh projected economic benefit. Samuel had preserved every scrap of proof. The trap of greed was tightening on Richard and Thomas. They thought signatures would bind the future, but paper without truth is only ink. The following afternoon, children from nearby houses wandered into the yard. They carried damp sketch pads, shy smiles. One of them asked, "Mrs. Whitlow, can you show us how to draw horses like those on your wall?" My throat tightened. I fetched pencils and spread blankets on the porch. Their laughter mingled with the scratch of graphite on paper. As I guided their hands, circles for heads, lines for legs, the weight in my chest lightened. The storm outside still raged. Richard and Thomas still schemed. Adrian still turned away. But here in the sound of pencils and the glow of curious eyes, I felt a flicker of Samuel's vision. Healing does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers through children, sketching green pastures that may yet survive. I placed my hand over the brass key hanging on my chest. "We will protect this place," I whispered. "For them." The air inside the county probate court was packed thick, charged like a storm before lightning. Rows of wooden benches were filled with neighbors, reporters, and strangers who smelled opportunity in conflict. I sat in the front row beside Harris. My hands pressed the brass key against my chest, steadying my heart. Across the aisle, Richard and Thomas leaned in with their lawyer smug, as if victory was already theirs. The judge entered, her black robe swaying. She raised a gavel and called the session to order. "We are here to consider the validity of Samuel Whitlow's will." Richard's lawyer rose first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Your Honor, we submit that the will presented by Mrs. Whitlow is incomplete. We have evidence Samuel intended to divide Maple Hollow equally among his brothers." He held up papers with theatrical flair, copies smudged and suspiciously convenient. Yet the murmurs among the crowd showed they struck their target. Doubt rippled like a current. I felt my breath catch, but Harris leaned close and whispered, "Wait. Not yet." The judge turned her gaze to me. "Mrs. Whitlow, do you have a response?" I stood. My knees trembled, but my voice carried. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." I lifted the camcorder from my bag and placed it on the evidence table. Its metal body caught the light. Gasps rose when the screen flickered alive. Samuel's face filled the room, strong, smiling, alive once more. "If you are watching this, I am gone," he said, his voice deep and steady. The hall fell silent. Even Richard stopped smirking. Samuel continued, "I rebuilt Maple Hollow not for division, but for healing. And I leave it to my wife Angela. No one else." The words rang like bells. My eyes blurred with tears, but I held my head high. Richard's lawyer scrambled. "This is emotional manipulation, not legal evidence." Harris stood smoothly, raising the blue folder. "On the contrary, here are county permits dated June 3, 2020. Here are renovation records stamped October 17, 2020. Here is the original deed filed May 7, 2020, all bearing Samuel's signature." He spread the documents before the judge, pages stamped, notarized, undeniable. The gavel struck once to quiet the room. Then Harris turned one more page. "And finally, Your Honor, a certified copy of Samuel's birth certificate." The paper was thin old, but official. The judge leaned forward. Her brows furrowed as she read the details. "Samuel Whitlow, born to Margaret and John Whitlow, lawful wedlock, 1957. Harris paused. His voice sharpened. "Compare with these birth records. Richard and Thomas both listed as illegitimate, born to Margaret before her marriage to John." The revelation thundered through the hall. Faces turned. Gasps cut the air. The final puzzle piece Samuel had hidden all these years now glowed under courthouse lights. Richard's face drained of color. Thomas slammed his fist on the bench, muttering curses. Their lawyer stammered, "Irrelevant. Irrelevant." But the judge raised a hand. "It is relevant. It explains motive, resentment, and fraudulent claims." The murmurs became arguments. Some whispered, so that's why they hated him. Others asked, but does blood define worth? The courtroom itself seemed to hold the great question, is legitimacy written on paper or in how a man lives his life? I looked at Adrian in the gallery. He sat stiff-torn between voices he once trusted and the truth unraveling before his eyes. Samuel's video concluded, his voice softer. Legacy is not birthright. Legacy is what you build, what you love, what you leave in good hands. The screen went black. Silence pressed down, heavy and final. The judge leaned back. The evidence is clear. Maple Hollow Farm belongs solely to Mrs. Angela Whitlow. The challenge is dismissed. Her gavel struck. The sound cracked like thunder, ending a storm. Richard shouted, "It's not fair." His voice broke more child than man. Guards moved closer. Thomas muttered darkly, refusing to meet my eyes. I turned to Adrian. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He stood, walked forward slowly, then suddenly collapsed into my arms. "I'm sorry, Mum," he sobbed. "I doubted you. I doubted Dad. I was wrong." I held him tight, my own tears falling into his hair. "You are my son. You were scared. But truth always speaks." The hall around us blurred into background noise. In that moment, healing began, not from winning land, but from reclaiming trust. I whispered to him, "Your father planned this. He wanted you to see with your own eyes. Now you know." Adrian nodded against my shoulder. "I know, Mum, and I believe you." The brass key between my fingers grew warm. Samuel's voice still lingered in the air, though the screen was dark. Legacy had spoken. Betrayal had been stripped. And my son had come home to me. The courtroom did not empty at once. Some lingered, whispering in tight circles. Others stared at me with pity, with respect, or with suspicion. But the storm had not yet passed. Richard stood in the aisle. His fists clenched, his face grey, with something deeper than rage. He raised his voice, trembling. "Do you know what it was like to grow up hearing Samuel was the real son, that I was a mistake, that Thomas and I were stains on the family name?" His words echoed against the old wood. We were treated like shadows, less than blood. The room fell silent. Even the guards paused. I stepped forward, the brass key still warm in my palm. My voice was steady. "Richard, I know your pain. But blood alone is not enough. Dignity keeps a family. Not bitterness." He laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You had the house, the husband, the name. We had scraps." I shook my head slowly. "No. I had Samuel's love, yes, but also his silence. I lived with secrets that cut me too, and yet I chose not to let them define me." The murmurs began again. Some nodded at Richard, sympathizing with the ache of being cast aside. Others looked at me, waiting for more. The debate was alive. Was family defined by blood or by justice? Adrian stood then, his voice cracking but strong. "Mum, I need to speak." He faced Richard, then the crowd. "I once thought money was everything. I thought land meant power, and power meant worth. That's why I doubted my own mother." He turned back to me, tears on his cheeks. "But Dad built this place for you, Mom. Not for greed, not for ambition, for love." I pressed my lips together, my chest rising with pride and sorrow. The generational conflict had laid itself bare. A son, torn between inheritance and integrity, now choosing his ground. The judge remained quiet, letting the confrontation breathe. Richard staggered, as if Adrian's words struck harder than any gavel. He whispered, "We deserved something." I answered softly, but it carried through the hall. "You deserved compassion, Richard. But you chose envy. You deserved peace. But you clung to hatred. That is why Samuel left nothing to you. Not because of birth, because of choice." The silence thickened. The contrast was clear: blood versus justice, wealth versus values. Adrian walked to me, his steps slow but certain. He placed his hand over mine, covering the brass key. His grip was firm, his eyes steady. "I'm with you, Mom." I met his gaze. In it, I saw the boy he once was and the man he was becoming. Quietly, I let forgiveness flow through me, not with words, but with the way my hand tightened around his. Healing did not arrive with triumph or speeches. It arrived in silence, in the invisible bridge, rebuilt between mother and son. Richard lowered his head. The fight drained from him, leaving only exhaustion. He muttered once more, "Blood should have been enough." I breathed deeply. My answer was final. "No, Richard. Blood isn't enough. Only dignity binds us. Only love lasts." The courtroom seemed to exhale with me. The storm was over. The weeks after the trial felt like the first clear days after a long storm. Maple Hollow was mine to hold, but I knew it could not remain only for me. Samuel's voice still echoed in my heart. Legacy is not land, but love. I carried those words like scripture as I walked through the wide pastures and empty halls. Adrian was the first to speak of building something new. One evening, we sat at the kitchen table with coffee cooling between us. He said, "Mum, this land could heal more than just us. We can make it a place where the community gathers." I looked at him, the brass key resting between us. For the first time in months, his eyes carried hope instead of doubt. So we began. Gloria came willingly. She had walked these fields longer than anyone, her hands rough, but her spirit gentle. "The children need to know the rhythm of hooves," she said, smiling as she led 2 ponies out of the barn. Soon the barnyard echoed with laughter as she taught little ones to mount and ride. Their squeals filled the air, as pure as the wind through the grass. Harris brought his order and discipline. He drafted transparent financial plans, pinning them to the corkboard in the main hall. Columns of numbers stood clear projected costs, community fund donations, volunteer hours. "People need to see where each dollar goes," he reminded me. And they did. Slowly, donations trickled in, small but steady, each one, signed with trust. One afternoon I invited Darnell to the porch. He arrived with calloused hands and weary eyes, still wearing his work boots. I told him, "This farm has work that matters if you want it. Not oil, but life. Legacy of work, not oil." He lowered his gaze, then lifted it again, stronger. "Yes, ma'am. I'll take it. I want my little girl to see me build, not destroy." The decision sparked quiet debates across town. Some said, "You should have taken the oil money. It's quicker." Others countered, "But look at the children riding. Look at the fields alive again." The town was caught between fast wealth and lasting roots. I knew where I stood. Samuel had chosen legacy over profit, and now it was my turn to honor that. Every evening after the children left, and the sun dipped behind the maples, I would sit in the main house. On the desk, Samuel left for me. I found a canvas tucked away, yellowed with time. It was my old sketch of a horse, half finished from 30 years ago. I remembered the day I abandoned it. Bills to pay, lessons to prepare, dreams shelved. Samuel had remembered what I had forgotten. He had saved it all those years. With trembling fingers I picked up a brush. I painted slowly, layer by layer, the outline taking shape once more. It felt like breathing after too long underwater. When the painting was complete, I hung it in the main hall above the fireplace. The children saw it and pointed. "That's our horse," they said, their voices bright. And in that moment, the farm no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a sanctuary. Loss had turned into legacy, not because of courts or contracts, but because love had been planted again in living soil. I placed the brass key on the mantel beneath the painting. No longer heavy with secrecy, it had become a symbol of choice. Samuel's gift, my vow. The sun set low on Maple Hollow, painting the fields with strokes of gold and shadow. I sat on the porch, the brass key warm in my hand. For months it had weighed on me like an anchor. Tonight it felt lighter, as if ready to be released. The wooden rocking chair creaked beneath me. The air smelled of hay, and rain mingled with laughter drifting from the barn. Children's voices carried high and bright as they circled on ponies under Gloria's gentle guidance. It was May 15th, 2023, the day the farm was officially opened as a community center. The date was written on our charter, stamped and signed by Harris. I traced the ridges of the key, the leaf-shaped charm, cool against my palm. My eyes blurred as memory pressed close. Samuel's voice whispered in my mind, his warnings, his secrets, his love. Slowly I rose. My steps were steady, though my chest ached. I entered the main hall, the painting of the horse gleaming in twilight. Above the fireplace, I hammered a small nail into the beam. Then, with both hands, I lifted the key and hung it there. The sound was soft, but final. A secret no longer hidden. A burden no longer mine alone. I stood still, staring. Tears slid down my cheeks, quiet and hot. For 30 years I had carried both love and loss, silence and questions. Now they had found their place on this wall. I whispered, voice breaking. Legacy is not land, not oil. Legacy is love. The words echoed faintly in the rafters, as if the house itself agreed. Outside I stepped back onto the porch. Adrian waved from the paddock, pride shining in his eyes as he steadied a child on horseback. Darnell tightened a saddle, his daughter clapping with joy. Gloria laughed, her arms wide like wings. The debate would never end. Some would always ask whether land belonged to those on paper or to those who held memory, whether legacy was measured in deeds or in love. But as I watched the children ride, cheeks flushed and hair streaming in the wind, I knew my answer. Legacy had never been about ownership. It was about what you gave forward. The rocking chair welcomed me again. I sat heart heavy with Samuel's absence, yet full with what he left behind. The ache of loss did not vanish. It softened, reshaped into something bearable. I closed my eyes, hearing the rhythm of hooves, the laughter of youth, the murmur of the fields. A new tomorrow had already begun here. I smiled through tears. We'll carry you with us, Samuel. Until tomorrow. Then I turned, looking not just at the fields, but at the invisible faces beyond them, the people listening now, wherever they may be. Legacy is not land. Legacy is love. Tell me, what is legacy in your family? Comment your city, subscribe, and share this story with someone you love. Thank you very much for watching. Share with those who also like stories. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you liked my story. Cheers.